Hey, this is Chris from the Kapstan team. I'm here to give you a quick demo of how to get up and running in Kapstan and how to deploy your first application. So jumping into the UI, I've gone ahead and already configured a connection to my AWS account. So we can go ahead and just make a new environment and begin setting things up. Go ahead and click the drop down here, click Add Environment. We can choose to build a new application because I want to do everything in a brand new workspace. Call it Chris Demo. Next, because I already set up my connection, I can just click on Use an Existing Connection and select my AWS account that I mentioned earlier. Finally, I'm just going to make this a staging environment because we don't need full production configurations. And I will select US West 1. We can see a cost estimation for the infrastructure pieces that will be provisioned first. So this will be for my VPC, my Kubernetes cluster, and other configurations that are required. Go ahead and click Create, and we can see the setup's in progress. I'm going to go ahead and cut for a few minutes and come back when this is finished. So a couple minutes later, and our environment is all set up. So we can begin to make our first service. If I click on the plus service button and choose a container service, this is essentially an application made up of container images. I'm going to call it demo server. And I already attached my container registry connection earlier for the purpose of this demo. So I'll go to test.org, select my Go server template, and I can leave my run command, my arguments blank. Go ahead and click confirm. Here we can see a high-level overview of our container service. So we see what the current selected version or the image tag is. If it was deployed, we'd see running pods, basic metrics like CPU and memory, any relevant alerts, a history of the prior deployments, or if it was a cron job, job runs, and finally service endpoints. I'm going to briefly go through the configuration and then set up some of the other infrastructure pieces we'll need for this demo. So I click on the Configure tab. We can see at a glance, just going down the list, environment variables, different scaling parameters, so auto scaling. We also support more advanced scaling using custom triggers using Kata. We can set hardware, so CPU, memory, whether we want to use a GPU, as well as various preferences on architecture, whether to use spot instances in order to save cost. Next, we can do some networking configuration, so what ports will be exposed. If we want this to be exposed to the public internet, we can configure a domain, which will automatically be provisioned with a TLS certificate. Configuration volumes and storage, don't need to click through everything, but these will mount files onto our pods to be used by our application. Health checks in order to make sure our application is resilient and can auto heal, and then run settings, which is the same that we skipped earlier. So we don't need to configure any of these just yet, but my server will need a Redis cache and a Postgres database. So let's go ahead and provision those, and then we can see how to wire them into this application. Going back to this plus button to add new services, we can go to SQL database. I will name it demo database, and I will go with the smallest instance type. And I'm going to be using Postgres here. Next up for our cache, again, we go to that plus button. We select a cache, enter name, let's call it demo cache, and click create. Gonna let these provision for a few minutes and we'll be back shortly. It's been a couple minutes and both our cache and our database are finished provisioning. I can go ahead and click on them now to inspect further. We see for our database, we have a monitoring panel. So we have CPU utilization, some memory information, active connections. And then if we click on attributes, we can get things like our endpoints and see what the current engine version is. I've gone ahead and configured a lot of this information already into my demo application just to save time, but we can click through and see what exactly I did. So if we go to configure, we can see I set a bunch of environment variables. So for plain text environment variables, these will get injected as is into our pod. For secret environment variables, these will be stored securely on the cloud provider connected to this environment. So because this is an AWS connection, it'll be stored in AWS parameter store as a secret, and it will be pulled directly from there onto your cluster. So this secret never goes through Kapstan system after you store it initially in order to make it more secure. Going down to the networking section, my server has two ports it listens to. An 8080 is the primary API port, and then 8081 is the metrics port. So I have both of these registered here. With all this configured, I can go ahead and go back to overview and click deploy. This will give us a high-level overview of the configuration I'm deploying, and in between deployments, it will show us what has changed to make it easier to understand what exactly I'm applying. But because we have no deployment so far, this just shows the entire config. I'll go and click deploy, and in a few minutes, we should see my application up and running. So it's been a couple minutes now, and we can see my application is fully up and running. In the monitoring section, I can get a high-level overview of the current status of my application. I can see all of my pods, I can see their statuses, restarts, their age, any issues, and CPU and memory trends over time. If I click on the logs button, I can see both live logs for any individual pod, as well as log search, which supports keywords. Now that my application is up and running, I want to interact with it, I want to test it, but it is not configured for public internet access. So what I can do is I can use the Kapstan CLI to actually connect to it on my local machine, which is great for developer environments, ephemeral environments, things like that. If I head over into my terminal, I can run Kapstan list services to see all the services I have. We can see this is the server I just set up, the database from earlier, and the cache from earlier. So with the CLI, I can actually connect to any of my server's endpoints. I can connect to my database, I can connect to my cache. But for the purpose of this demo, I'm just going to connect to my server. So we can see using the -s flag, I can connect to my server. And I will select the primary API endpoint. And while this is getting set up, I'll explain what the application is. Essentially, it's a dummy bookstore application. So there's 3 API endpoints. There's one to add books, one to list books, one to delete books. Essentially a very simple CRUD application. And I have a Postman collection set up to demonstrate the functionality. We can see here the CLI says that I can interact with this service at this local address. So I'll go over to my Postman collection and set this demo host variable for this address. So first, the listbooks API, we can see that everything is currently empty, which seems right. There's a post API to store things, which said the author is me, the title is my book. Click send, we can see it's stored. If we go back to the list, we can see it should now show up. And the cache is in between all of this to speed up the requests. Finally, if I go to my delete endpoint and copy my UUID, I can remove this book. And we can see that works as well, and confirming it with the list. Heading back into the application, we can see all of these requests being logged. So we can see here, 200 for get add books. So this is the list books endpoint. We can see a delete call, which I made. We can see the post call as well. And if we need to filter, say, we want to see anytime a 404 happens, we can see that as well using the keyword search. Hopefully this demo has been helpful in showing you how you can get up and running with your first application on Kapstan and some of the features the platform can offer. Thanks so much.